Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another High Sky Monthly. I have lost track of what number this is, but I think it's number 49 or 50. So we're so excited to be here with you all today. And we have a very special guest, Gaël Le Bris. Before we bring on Mr. Le Bris, I will just go through some quick announcements and we'll just go from there. So during the webinar, you all do have control to unmute and turn your camera on, but please kindly keep your mics muted and your cameras off until we get to the Q&A section. So one big announcement is that High Sky just formed the HIFA Alliance, the Hydrogen for All Alliance. And let me show you what that is. Hopefully you can see it on my screen. Could you put a 1 in the chat if you see the Hydrogen for All Alliance? Okay, awesome. Thank you. And so what this alliance does is we're focused on bringing hydrogen to the underserved communities and businesses. That was something that we identified as a really strong opportunity and need for energy equity and environmental justice and all of those sorts of things. So together with USI, Oric, Morton and Company, and Prophesy, we are I'll read you. In the quest for environmental justice and equitable access to clean energy, addressing the demand side problem in the clean hydrogen market stands paramount. As the world leans towards sustainable energy solutions, hydrogen emerges as a promising candidate. Yet, many small businesses find it daunting to transition due to the upfront capital expenses involved. They're willing to embrace the hydrogen revolution, but only if the costs align with their carbon-producing alternatives. Here's where AI comes in, optimizing and streamlining the dynamics of the hydrogen market. So stay tuned and follow that journey. You can go on our website and click on HIFA, and then there's a little subscription box. You'll see a lot of exciting things coming out of that. We also submitted to the Department of Energy demand side proposal with this initiative. And, even though High Sky is a nonprofit focused on hydrogen aviation, we see some of these other opportunities as paramount to help advancing hydrogen aviation later. So we're really excited about that. Another exciting thing that I learned over the last week that Rishav wrote a fantastic piece about was white hydrogen. I had never heard of white hydrogen before, but apparently you can drill for it and you can extract pure hydrogen. Often in the hydrogen community, we say, hydrogen is the most abundant molecule in the universe, but it isn't found in its pure form. But apparently it is in the earth. And so Bill Gates is heavily invested in this white hydrogen. I encourage you to read this. You can find it on our website. I'll actually just stick a link to it if you want to go ahead and click it and save it for later. I encourage you to read this. I was surprised that I had never heard of this. We were always talking about the hydrogen rainbow. So I encourage you to give that a read. Thank you, Rishav, for writing that fantastic piece. Another big thing is, High Sky believes that artificial intelligence is also paramount to the success of any company or industry in these next decades to come. I've been quoted saying, and I'll say it again, AI is not going to take our jobs, but people that use AI will. And that goes for companies as well. AI is not going to, steal your company, but companies that use AI will dominate companies that don't use AI. And so we embrace AI fully at High Sky, and we launched workshops where we are teaching other companies how to implement AI into their business. And we feel this is very relevant to hydrogen and aviation because a lot of the processes that we use in hydrogen or aviation could use some updates. They're, resource intensive, time intensive. And so if we can speed some of these things up for you all, we feel like that will help advance the industry as a whole. And some exciting news that happened over the weekend, if you follow the AI space, which we do closely, was we just absolutely love ChatGPT. On Friday, the CEO of ChatGPT was fired, and also Plug Power stock has totally been crashing. So here's a piece that I wrote kind of just for fun over the weekend. I'll also stick a link to that. You can give that a read. They fired their CEO. OpenAI fired their CEO on Friday, and then Plug Power stock just been tanking over the past week or two. And these are two companies that we work very closely with. So is High Sky doomed? Spoiler alert, no, we're not, but I just wanted to write this for fun. Then on Saturday, so Sam Altman was fired from OpenAI on Friday. Then on Saturday, he was in talks with the board to potentially come back to OpenAI. Then last night, in the middle of the night, Microsoft announced that they hired Sam Altman to run their AI team. And this was especially interesting because when Sam Altman was fired, many other leaders and a couple co-founders also quit OpenAI with him. So this will be really interesting to follow, especially because Microsoft has already invested in OpenAI. So they basically kind of own OpenAI. And I have theories. I'm going to write another piece about why I think Microsoft did this and what I think is happening behind the scenes. But anyway, give that a read. I wrote this prior to knowing that Microsoft hired Sam, and I did buy some Microsoft stock last night. I hope it pays off. We'll see. So Flying High 2024 announcements are coming soon. Oops, I forgot that actually should just be deleted, so you can just watch me edit in real time. Yeah, High Sky Monthly, December 18th. You're not gonna want to miss. I'm the distinguished speaker. This is the registration, and I'll tell you why you don't want to miss it, other than hearing me ramble for an hour and a half. I'm going to summarize 2023. We launched in January, and whoa, have we had some ups and downs over our first year in operation. But all in all, it's been a huge win and a massive success, and I am just beyond grateful. And so I'll kind of give you guys a rundown of our highs and lows over 2023. We're also going to announce some exciting things that nobody knows about for 2024. We will also announce where and when Flying High 2024 will be, and we're going to give away $3,000 in giveaways. You have to attend to win, and trust me when I tell you, you are not going to want to miss that. So make sure to register for High Sky Monthly. It's December 18th, next month. I know we're getting really close to the holidays, but it'll be a fun time. So we also have our members area in High Sky Monthly, and let me just show you where that is again. We've got almost a couple of hundred people in here. So the way you get to is you go to more and members. I would like to have that easier to find in the future. The reason why this is important is because I get several emails a day for people asking me to introduce them to somebody, or if I know where to find, an electrolyzer that can do, certain, amount of kilowatts. But these types of things, just about anybody I would introduce you or any company I would point you to is in this group. So I encourage you to go in here, and you can see all the other members and directly message them. This is a really awesome group in here. People aren't very active. We hope that will change in the future. If you are a member of that group, it's totally free to join. If you are a member and you have some feedback about how it could be better, please let us know, because we want to get people using it. We think it'll help all of you all advance your hydrogen endeavors. So please, if you hate it, let us know, and we want to fix it and make it better. But yeah, just know that you can contact just about everybody in there directly. So that concludes my announcements. I will now pass it over to Dr. Rishabh Shrestha, who is our COO or head of operations, as I have it on here. All right, Rishabh, take it away.
Hey, Danielle. Hey, everyone. Welcome to High Sky Monthly. We're nearing the year end, so excited, like Danielle said, exciting things happening in all the fronts, and we have an exciting speaker today. Today's speaker is Mr. Gaël Le Bris. He's a vice president of the aviation planning and senior technical principal at WSP USA. Gaël supervises aviation system and airport planning projects and provides expertise in aviation engineering, operations, and safety in the US and abroad. He is the chair of the Transportation Research Board's AV090 Aviation Safety, Security, and Emergency Management Standing Committee. Gaël is an active member of the Airport Consultants Council, SAE International, and our very own, the Vertical Flight Society. Mr. Le Bris and his team have been at the forefront of advanced air mobility, and they have been conducting several innovative research efforts and projects and practical implementation projects across the nation. For example, he was the principal investigator for the Airport Cooperative Research Program at the TRB, Research Report 239, which talks about preparing your airport for electric aircraft and hydrogen technologies. And he was also one of the lead authors for another paper of the ACRP, Report 243, Urban Air Mobility and Airport Perspective. Mr. Le Bris holds a master's degree in aeronautical engineering and economics from the National University of Civil Aviation in Toulouse, France, as well as also in airport development and management from the Florida Institute of Technology, Melbourne, Florida. So to you, Mr. Le Bris, welcome to High Sky Monthly, and we expect to hear another amazing talk from you.
Thank you, Risha, for the introduction. Thank you, Danielle, for inviting me. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be with you today to talk about integrating hydrogen technologies at airports and vertiports. So before we start talking about technical matters, maybe just a reminder on the high-level timeline, if you want, for the introduction of hydrogen, and also a reminder on why is there this interest in developing and implementing hydrogen technologies in aviation. One of the big drivers of all of this, it's net zero aviation. You know, there is this, we made this promise, when I say we, it's the global aviation community, to deliver by 2050 and net zero carbon aviation. Failure is not an option. We have to deliver on this promise. And there are different drivers available that are featured in this figure that you've probably seen before, which is the strategy of the global aviation community to achieve this net zero objective. And hydrogen could be one of these leverage, not necessarily on the short-term horizon, maybe still emerging on the medium-term horizon, but on the long-term horizon, hydrogen could be one big leverage, not only to strengthen this net zero status, but maybe also to pave the way to a post-hydrocarbon era in aviation, you know, going away from jet fuel, including SAF, beyond 2050. So hydrogen could be one of these drivers that you see in the technology segment of this strategy, you know, the blue portion, and play a role specifically on the long-term horizon. So now if we look at the individual market segments, hydrogen could have a role here to play in various different markets. Of course, electric propulsion systems, you're all aware that to do electric aviation, you can have a battery electric aircraft or fuel cell hydrogen, electric aircraft. So with advanced air mobility and also small general aviation aircraft, I think that's understated. Electric propulsion systems can really help the GA community decarbonize and also solve other issues, like for instance, lead emissions. So hydrogen fuel cell technologies can power electric and hybrid propulsion systems, EHPS. But also on the long-term horizon, hydrogen could be an alternative to traditional jet fuels and be burned into gas turbines, turboprops, or equivalent to our contemporary jet engines. Okay. So, of course, we have all of these great technologies, aircraft technologies being developed, but it's not that's not the end of the story. You know, if you come with your brand new aircraft at the airport, and if the infrastructure, not only brick and mortar, but also policies and so on are not in place, well, hydrogen is just going to fail. Okay, so again, in order to have that aviation hydrogen ecosystem bloom and succeed, we need to take into consideration the infrastructure aspects of it and make sure that airports are hydrogen ready. And you see here that actually hydrogen doesn't have applications only for powering aircraft. Okay, we could use hydrogen for replacing these big diesel engines that are used for backup power generation, for instance. On the land side, you have also some electric vehicles that could be hydrogen powered. You have, of course, all the advanced air mobility that is emerging. And then beyond, there are big questions today about should airports be energy producers on the long-term horizon? You might have read this recent report from GAO on power outages across the national airport system and how we could address that. Well, having, you know, again, power generation at airports, not just for, you know, producing green energy and selling that to the grid, but also making airport more power resilient could be something. And here also hydrogen could play a role. So when engaging stakeholders for introducing hydrogen at the airport, we need a strategy, right? And when it comes to the stakeholder ecosystem at airports, it's something broadly different than what you can face, for instance, in aircraft manufacturing or even what flight operators do. And with hydrogen, we're going to see a slight evolution of that ecosystem at airports and around airports. Not that we're going to see necessarily a lot of new players, even so, for instance, industrial gas suppliers are not today what I will call an airport stakeholder. Regulators of these specific activities are not today necessarily airport stakeholders, and in the future they will be so, but also existing stakeholders will have to be engaged on new questions that basically everything you know around the integration of hydrogen for firefighting, aircraft rescue, compliance with FAA standards, and so on. And if you're looking for guidance in order to engage these stakeholders and to have to do a successful outreach, I would like to recommend ACRP Research Report 229 on airport collaborative decision making, ACDM. ACDM is a process that was developed initially for real-time operations, but we explain in that ACRP report how you can leverage these techniques and the overall ACDM process in order to do as well project program management, strategic decision-making, and so on. So my 4 keys to successful implementation of hydrogen technologies at airports and vertiports are, number 1, it has to be safe. Okay, we are in aviation, it's safety first, always. It has to be compatible. Again, it's not just about aircraft technologies. If the aircraft lands and you don't have the right policies, the right equipment, the right infrastructure, the right operations in place at the airport, it's just not going to work. 3, it has to be relevant. You know, we need to do a lot of homework here in order to identify the specific market segments where hydrogen might be relevant. It's not that obvious, and that's a legitimate question. So again, where is it going to be relevant and when as well? Because with the emergence of a broader hydrogen ecosystem and economy, for instance, all the cost benefit analysis, the logistics, the supply chains around hydrogen for aviation might change. And also inclusive. And you can put different things under that terminology. It has to be inclusive because, like for advanced air mobility, for instance, where hydrogen is a big thing, we need to engage local communities, engage them, educate them, and bring them into the conversation and make sure that they are okay with the integration of these new fluids, at the airport. Because again, there is this big misconception around hydrogen. Some people, they scream Hindenburg the moment they hear about hydrogen. It's more complex than that. And no, it's not because hydrogen is being stored at your local airport that you're going to see that kind of situation. Actually, it might be even safer than existing aviation fuels. And inclusive as well, because we are creating, again, a brand new ecosystem from scratch. And again, it's not just about aircraft technologies, it's about all these businesses, all these jobs that are going to be created around the production, the distribution, the storage, and the use of hydrogen in aviation. And we need to make sure that this ecosystem benefits all, including local communities, of course. So again, as I said, safety first, always in aviation. Our business is literally built around delivering safe aviation operations. And here is the thing, pre-existing level of safety of integrating hydrogen at aviation facilities varies depending on the complexity and the size of these aviation facilities. For instance, you take a small helipad or vertipad and you bring a hydrogen pod for supplying your hydrogen electric VTOL. Well, safety there is pretty straightforward. Okay, low level of complexity, no adverse interaction with other kind of operations. I'm not saying that there is no due diligence to do, of course, but again, it's pretty straightforward to implement safe operations. Now you are at the other edge of the spectrum when it comes to complex aviation facilities, like for instance, a hub airport, bringing one hydrogen flight operator into that game and creating a supply chain just for that early adopter of hydrogen is a bit more complex from a safety standpoint. And I'm not saying that hydrogen per se is unsafe. Read the warning at the bottom of the slide. I say also that every time in aviation we bring something new, we have to do our due diligence. And when we don't have lessons learned and established practices, or we need to make sure that we develop this, and that's what we have on the horizon in terms of big challenge when it comes to integrating hydrogen, either for electric aircraft or jet aircraft into the airport and aviation operations setting, generally speaking. Okay, today, for instance, for jet fuel, you have established practices with and standards with ASTM, with SAE, with NFPA when it comes to building these systems, storing the fuel, distributing the fuel, operating on the ground aircraft. And fueling systems and so on. Today, we don't have that in hydrogen. It's still emerging. NFPA is working on their own standards for hydrogen in aviation, for instance, and other organizations are doing so. So again, it's not that hydrogen is unsafe as of today, it's that we have a bit of uncertainty here because everything has to be developed. And when we have a question mark, well, that's a source of concern from an aviation standpoint, of course. So, a couple of years ago with my deputy, we run a research project on identifying, if you want, the most wanted safety hazards with the introduction of aviation innovation, generally speaking, was not just about hydrogen, but also about all the technologies around advanced air mobility, new eVTOLs technologies, battery electric powered EHPS, and of course, hydrogen in aviation. Part of these findings were presented at Forum 78 of the Vertical Flight Society. And here you have that mapping, if you want, of our most wanted safety hazards from a typical aircraft design. So that's not specifically, that's not hydrogen specific if you want, but a lot of aircraft that are potentially using hydrogen as a fuel or energy vector to electricity have atypical aircraft configurations down to hydrogen storage leak, for instance. Again, not saying that this is hydrogen specific or that hydrogen is unsafe, but we need to address these into standards, practices, recommendations, and lessons learned, and so on, in order to make sure that these happen in a safe and efficient way. And I'm not going to go into details for each one of these most wanted, but I'm just going to go through 3 of them. For instance, number 1, everything about hydrogen storage and distribution. Again, for the general public and part of the aviation community, the moment you talk about hydrogen in aviation, again, a lot of people, they scream Hindenburg, right? This was nearly 1 century ago with a very specific aerial vehicle and an accident that happened also in very specific conditions with a ginormous volume of hydrogen stored in very specific conditions as well. We are in 2023. What we're talking about for hydrogen in aviation today is completely different. This is not a balloon full of hydrogen. We're talking about safe hydrogen tank technologies that already exist, you know, in terms of conceptually speaking. And what we see in test, you know, involving these kind of technologies on cars, you know, run through a fuel cell electric propulsion systems for a car, is that actually these technologies are so safe that they're even safer than conventional cars running on fuel, you know. Again, it's important to educate ourselves as a global aviation industry, and also to really you know, do the groundwork when it comes to testing and confirming the level of safety of these technologies. We need to make sure that hydrogen on aircraft does not increase the severity of typical accidents. So if we think about, for instance, a high energy catastrophic event, like for instance, the crash of an aircraft, you know, onto the ground at high speed, we cannot expect the hydrogen tank to withstand this kind of events and not have leaks, or I mean, we're talking about the full destruction of the aircraft one way or the other. But here I'm talking about low energy or low intensity events. For instance, a fuel truck colliding with an aircraft on the ramp, okay, or even an aircraft doing a runway excursion. Today, typically runway excursions are not deadly, you know, they are fairly mild when it comes to the integrity of the passengers and even of the aircraft. So we need to make sure that all these new aircraft technologies involving hydrogen do not increase the severity of these incidents and accidents. And this is, of course, groundwork through industry standardization, work with the FAA and other regulators and so on to make sure that this happens. But this is doable as of today, based on what we see on the horizon in terms of aircraft technologies. And one that here is more airport or ramp operation specific is everything around atypical configurations. And this is not specific to hydrogen per se, but also to aerial innovation, generally speaking, is that a lot of these aircraft is not just you know, conventional aircraft with a hydrogen tank in it, is that we're going to have atypical aircraft design features on it. Even the refueling or container exchange on the ramp, it's going to be something new in terms of procedures, in terms of technical features and so on. And we need to make sure that the ramp community and also the broader airfield operations community, including the ARF staff and so on, are trained and aware of all of these new features in order to prevent incidents and accidents to happen in the field. Earlier, I talked about, you know, these 4 keys to successful implementation. The first one was safety. We just talked about that. The next one is compatibility. So when I talk about aircraft airport compatibility, it's all about answering that specific question. Will it fit? You have an existing airport or vertiport. Will your new technology, your new aircraft type or so on fit in these operations, this facility, this infrastructure? And if not, what can we do in order to ensure that compatibility? So just a brief history of aircraft-airport compatibility. All of these, started after World War II with the increase in size of airliners that challenged the airport system, not only in the United States, but all around the world. Basically, aircraft were becoming larger. Then we had jet aircraft technologies coming in. And because all of these airports were at that time and are still public use facilities, and at that time, national assets owned by government, all the different governments of the world decided to issue standards that facilitate this process of planning and design of infrastructure for not only existing aircraft, but also future aircraft that are on the horizon, and many decades in that process, in the mid-90s and onward, we had the rise of, again, a new generation of aircraft that were way bigger than what we had so far. I'm talking about the A340-600, 777-300, A380, 747-8, what we used to call the new large aircraft NLA. And all the approach of aircraft-airport compatibility was reshaped, if you want, in order to question, again, all the existing practices and standards, in order to establish policies and practices that can not only help for the NLA, but also establish a process, if you want, a collaborative process that will help in the future integrate new aircraft technologies. Well, guess what? It was used a few decades later for thinking about the integration of the 777-8, 777-9, with the folding wingtips. I had the pleasure to be part of that coalition called BACG2, led by ACI World, in order to issue these standards. And here I'm reconnecting all of that big story with what's happening with hydrogen and aerial innovation, is that now we have a process within the airport industry in order to have that discussion with OEMs, with future flight operators and so on. We don't have to restart from scratch. Actually, we have to bring in these new stakeholders and these new questions around these new technologies into the existing framework that is so great. We took nearly half a century to develop these forums, and this process for aircraft-airport compatibility. We should leverage this in order to have, collaboratively speaking, this discussion between, again, the airport community, OEMs, flight operators, regulators, ANSPs as well, the air navigation service providers and so on, in order to all together facilitate that integration process. And again, if you're not convinced that the ground infrastructure is important, I'm telling you, of course, aircraft engineering is great. And of course, it's amazing what we've been doing in terms of development of new aircraft design. But if we are not capable of also doing that same work of integration of these aircraft technologies on the ground and setting the right policies, equipment, and infrastructure, is not going to work, because these aircraft will not be able to fly anywhere. When it comes to aircraft airport compatibility criteria, that comes from another research paper we presented at Forum 79 last year. This is a high level, and again, the paper details all of these different criteria, but an itemization, if you want, of the different compatibility criteria to keep in mind when we look at integrating new aircraft design and new technologies into the airport setting. And in bold blue letters, I highlighted the areas, the domains, if you want, where hydrogen technology specifically might have an impact, or if you want, where we need to direct our focus when it comes to discussing the integration of hydrogen technologies into the airport setting. And again, aircraft airport compatibility. It's all part of developing new aircraft technologies and running a new aircraft program. You know, this great quote that I borrowed to these two gentlemen from 1981. They were actually part of McDonnell Douglas at that time, and I think they summarize everything when it comes to again aircraft airport compatibility. It's at the core of the success, the commercial success and the operational success of a new aircraft program, I believe. So how to bring hydrogen to the final aviation user? Basically today, there are two ways to do so. The first one is to bring containers with hydrogen already packed into the aircraft and you swap containers. The second one is to refuel the aircraft with hydrogen from a trucks or maybe at some point in the future with a hydrogen fueling system. Why not? Why, like we do for conventional fuel at large hub airports, okay? And of course, a lot of questions behind in terms of airport planning and design, but also supply chain on how we bring that hydrogen for the production site that could be at some point at the airport, at least for some applications, to the final aviation users. And here also, everything has to be built, right? Because hydrogen is something fairly new in aviation. In terms of supply chain, I try to keep up to date this graphic along the way. Of course, the purpose of this graphic is not to say that all of these different supply chains have to be implemented at each individual airport. The goal of this graphic is to depict all the different supply chains, if you want, that are available or being developed or being thought as of today, from the production to the final aviation user. And when I keep saying aviation user, it can be an aircraft, it can be a ground support equipment, can be a ground vehicle, or it can be another airport application. Like for instance, I was mentioning earlier today, potential backup generation based on hydrogen fuel cells, power packs that are based on fuel cells. That's to me an aviation user as well. And you see that, of course, we can achieve this using the hydrogen, but also we can use hydrogen carriers. Here, the idea is that you have another molecule. It's not hydrogen, but it's a chemical compound with a lot of H, a lot of hydrogen atoms on it. And the production and transportation of that hydrogen carrier may be more interesting or easier or cost competitive, depending on the market and the use case, than doing the same directly with hydrogen. You bring your hydrogen carrier at the airport, and at the airport, you're going to dehydrogenize that molecule in order to have on one side your dehydrogen, on the other side the byproducts that you might want to use locally for another purpose or bring back to the production site in order to rehydrogenize all these little guys. Okay, so again, here this is the high-level schematic version of it. You have your hydrogen carrier, you dehydrogenize at the airport, and you get your H2. If you don't want to do that, if we want to produce and use directly hydrogen, well, today we have a problem. Is that maybe something like nearly 75% of all the hydrogen produced around the world comes from hydrocarbon reforming. Basically you take a hydrocarbon chain or molecule and you're going to break that at very high temperature in order to extract your hydrogen. And on the other side, we have carbon monoxide. That's basically the main process used today to produce hydrogen, and it's not green at all. It consumes a lot of energy. It emits a lot of GHGs. Now, if we want to go away from that and produce green hydrogen, one first step is, of course, you could try to capture all of that. Still the same process with reforming, but capture the the carbon monoxide or dioxide and store it or reuse it. That's what we call blue hydrogen. But then also developing greener processes, and it's everything that you see on the right part of the screen. This is coming from US DOE, and actually that graphic, I think it's more than 10-year-old, but it's still pretty accurate, because you see today we see the emergence of small processing units in order to produce hydrogen in a more climate-friendly way and air quality-friendly way, using the electrolysis of water with renewable energies. But the thing in here, we're talking about small quantities. Okay, so that might work for instance, a small GA airport with aircraft using hydrogen for powering electric propulsion systems through fuel cells. And you have a few airports already testing these technologies as of today. But if we want to power a large proportion of the aircraft fleet with hydrogen, we will have to develop a greener, more energy efficient a process to mass produce green hydrogen. And this is still under development. Now back to the hydrogen carriers. We are doing as a side project these days a study of on hydrogen carriers. Here you have a fairly comprehensive inventory of all the hydrogen carriers that are being considered as of today. And what we are doing right now is that we are trying to develop key performance indicators and also criteria for a strategic decision-making purpose. In other words, which hydrogen carrier should we prefer for this or that specific use case or market or utilization? And it's not just about counting the age on the molecule. Of course, we have to look at the energy that it takes in order to run that process. We need to look at the cost of the industrial process for producing the hydrogen carriers and dehydrogenizing it at the airport for the final aviation user. We can talk also about the carbon and environmental footprint and other criteria that can be used as well for decision-making purpose. So that's an ongoing project. I don't have findings to share today, but I will be very glad to present during another High Sky Society webinar in the future on our findings. So let's talk about planning now, airport planning and aviation planning, generally speaking. So again, it's not that straightforward to bring these new technologies into the airport setting, and it's something that we need to plan ahead. Okay, plan ahead with the different stakeholders, plan ahead with local communities. I already said that. And what you have on the screen right now is a planning process that we developed for ACRP Research Report 243 on the implementation of advanced air mobility at airports. We have another process, a bit less maybe a high level, more into the technical matters, specifically for electric aircraft technologies, you know, the planning of the integration of these technologies with a bigger focus on aircraft airport compatibility. And this one is a higher level. Again, it's about airport planning, how to plan with the stakeholders for the development of advanced air mobility activities at the airport. And I believe that process can be used, or hydrogen can be piggybacked on that high level process, especially since the big short-term use case for hydrogen is with advanced air mobility, especially regional air mobility, and the use of hydrogen for powering EHPS, electric hybrid propulsion system, through fuel cells. Okay. And again, engaging communities is very important because of all these prejudices around hydrogen, and also all the questions that have, legitimate questions that have communities about the advent of advanced air mobility and aerial innovation generally speaking. They're worried about that. We need to show them what it can bring to them, and also the fact that when it comes to noise and so on, it has nothing to do with existing aviation operations, especially existing helicopter operations. Another aspect of aviation planning, which is maybe more with the states, is all the impact that could have hydrogen in aviation and also electric aviation on fuel revenues. You may be aware of this or not, but a large part of what states do for their aviation ecosystem is funded through fuel revenues. And of course, if aircraft don't run on jet fuel or avgas anymore, how can you collect these fuel charges to re-inject all of these into your aviation system? So a few food for thought here, a bit of food for thought. What will be the impact of these emerging aviation fuels on the legacy fuel revenues over time, and what should be doing? What should be should the state be doing in order to offset that impact? Should we say that green aviation is exempted of any kind of fuel tax, and everything is going to go on the legacy fuel users, or should we create a framework for integrating these emerging fuels into the aviation fuel taxation system? Question mark. I don't have the answer for today. And of course, you've seen one airport, the same way. Well, maybe you've seen one state, you've seen one state. And that's pretty much it for me today. I have a few QR codes for you if you want to grab your smartphone. I'm going to go through these 2 slides. In conclusion, what I have to say is that we still have a lot of homework to do, okay, in order to make sure that hydrogen is relevant, commercially viable, operationally viable, safe, and so on. And this cannot happen without big coalition of stakeholders doing groundwork when it comes to developing standards and helping local governments developing policies and creating a supply chain that is meaningful not only for aviation, but also other hydrogen users. And it's very important to have forums like the High Sky Society and others in order to initiate that discussion. But then after creating these coalitions, like we did aviation industry around other issues, such as I mentioned, the integration of the new large aircraft, for instance, in the national and global aviation systems. We have these frameworks, successful success story that were developed for other not only technical, but also strategic problems in aviation. And we need to learn from these processes and reuse these processes as far as practicable. Okay, so QR codes I have for you. These 2 research papers that we presented at the annual conference of the Vertical Flight Society, respectively, on aircraft airport compatibility and operational safety. And these 2 ACRP research reports, respectively, on preparing your airport for electric aircraft and hydrogen technologies. Okay, and the other one on labeled as urban air mobility, but in the report you'll see we go beyond UAM per se, and we talk about advanced air mobility, generally speaking. We talk about hydrogen, we talk about high-level aviation planning, groundwork with the communities, but also about master planning and potential strategies in order to adapt the airside, terminal, and landside infrastructure for these new operations and activities. Okay. Thank you very much. If we don't have time to address your questions during the Q&A, please feel free to reach out to me, Gaël.lebris @WSP.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaël. That was a fantastic presentation. So now we will open it up to Q&A. The first person that I see in the chat with a question is Ovi. Ovi, would you like to unmute and turn your camera on and ask Mr. Le Bris your question?
Unmute. There's no reason to turn the camera on yet. Thank you. Just a quick question. Do you have a specific company in mind when it comes to hydrogen backup systems for the air traffic control tower?
It's not just for, and sorry if it was not clear in the presentation, it's not just for ATCTs. You know, airports as well, they have the same kind of backup power systems in order to run their safety critical systems, like for instance, the airfield ground lights. You know, these are FAA requirements. And then on top of these federal requirements, they have also backup generators for their passenger terminal facility, for instance, and so on. When it comes to specific brands, I don't want to advertise specific interest, but you have some big names working either in power generation or aircraft engines, or both, you know, with an overlap that are developing these kind of solutions as of today. And I believe they already have solutions off the shelf for again, using power packs based on hydrogen fuel cells instead of heavy diesel engines.
Great, thanks. Next question is actually from me. What role do you see the 7 hydrogen hubs playing in getting hydrogen to the airports? The reason I asked that question is I saw an interview with the CEO of Plug Power, and he was talking about Mr. Andy Marsh. He was talking about the reason they're struggling right now financially is because they have such a difficult time sourcing the hydrogen. So, you know, we hear a lot about the demand side challenges, but here we have a company with demand and they have an unpredictable supply chain. And so I'm wondering, you know, what role will the hubs play in the airports, and how can like the airports and airlines avoid kind of getting into a situation like Plug Power's in right now?
That's a very good question. And the answer is, I think that all these hydrogen hubs should look at either early hydrogen adopters in aviation or potential research clusters nearby, you know, research and development and so on, that could be involved into these projects. To give you one example, for instance, we completed recently a AAM implementation study for Utah Department of Transportation, and one of the question that or issue that we raised, if you want, is part of regional air mobility might, you know, very early on require hydrogen. You know, that the hydrogen fuel cells are, you know, RAM is a great use case for hydrogen fuel cells for EHPS, but you need to bring hydrogen to the aviation user if you want to implement RAM with this kind of aircraft technology. So here you have kind of a circular problem, is that in order to have hydrogen, you need to have users, but users are not going to emerge if you don't have already a supply chain available. And in Utah, I'm not sure if there is one of these hubs in the list of approved hubs today, but there are initiatives around hydrogen, and the emerging potential emerging aviation users have to take into consideration here as well, I believe. The thing now is that aviation, again, is one use case among others when it comes to hydrogen. I'm not even sure that the early adopters of hydrogen in aviation are going to be big in terms of demand compared, for instance, to the long-haul trucking community. That's a ginormous hydrogen user that could emerge very quickly if they decide to adopt altogether fuel cell-powered long-haul truck. So again, we need to see where it makes sense to develop our own supply chains and when, but also how we can piggyback on other supply chains that are emerging through these kind of projects as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Was that study one of the QR codes that you shared?
No, but if you go on the Advanced Air Mobility portal of Utah DOT, you will find a legislative executive summary of this study. The full research report is not yet available online, but you will see a legislative summary on the website of Utah DOT. They have a webpage dedicated to advanced air mobility.
Okay, great. Thank you. And for those of you listening, when Gail is saying RAM or RAM, he's talking about regional air mobility. So it's just what it means. It's regional air transportation, which we had a presentation by Sergio Cacuta, I think it was 2 or 3 months ago on this topic. It was really insightful. So if you're interested in learning more about that, make sure to come next month because we'll tell you where to access all that information as well. Okay, let's see. Next, we have Brian Hudson. Would you like to unmute and ask Mr. Le Bris your question? Good to see you, Brian. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, good to see you. And thanks for the conference call here, the webinar. So appreciate it. Actually, I didn't have a question. I was just actually responding to some of the questions in the chat about the standards for aviation and hydrogen. So I thought I'd throw a link out there that would link some folks to the ISO hydrogen technologies that's going on.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes, and I don't see the link. I see you said hubs will produce H2 gas feedstock. Maybe I need to.
I think it's 3 comments from the end.
Okay, thank you. I'm not down far enough.
And thank you. That's a good point, actually. And just very quickly, you mentioned ISO. I did mention SAE and FPA, ASTM as well, I believe. Again, there is no aviation standards already available as of today for practitioners to develop these technology and supply chains, but it's coming. You know, it's a hot topic in all these standardization organizations and so on. And you see all these big names in their respective fields of work, either revising or developing new standards for facilitating the integration of hydrogen in aviation.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And even if you put a comment in the chat and you don't exactly have a question, you're more than welcome to come on and say that. One of my favorite things about the way that we do these webinars is these discussions that we have at the end. So even if it's just a comment, we've had some really cool discussions. So next I see Arnie, and that was my way of asking Arnie to unmute and come on and say your comment out loud. It's also good to see you as well, Arnie.
I see your question. Do you want me to read your question, Arnie?
Yes. I don't know if Arnie is still here.
H2 on aircraft is a long way away. H2 in airport infrastructure is today, as long as we have hydrogen production to support. Yeah, I don't have the context of your question exactly, but what I can think of when I read your comment is that there is kind of a collision between timelines and strategic decision making here. Okay, we know that these hydrogen aircraft technologies, they are going to take time to be approved, certified, and be available, commercially speaking. Even just AAM, we know that it's not going to happen before 2025. And when we talk about hydrogen as a jet fuel, Airbus, which is very optimistic, is talking about 2035. But again, it's not tomorrow. At the same time, you know that all these capital project funding timeline and so on for airport infrastructure and statewide aviation system infrastructure, we're talking about +5, +10, +20-year visions. And you have to have your plan set, and you're going to request your money to FAA for the next 5 years or so. That's the CIP cycle, if you want. So you see that here you have things that they are going to take time to fully emerge, but they are emerging right now. And at the same time, as an airport or as a state DOT, you want to plan ahead for these things. But again, it's something that is not yet completely mature as a domain that with standards, with specific funding mechanisms and so on. We don't know yet how, when, how much, how far flight operators are going to adopt these technologies and when they will be available and so on. So it's kind of the nightmare of the planner, if you want. You have big opportunities, fairly short timelines, and at the same time, a lot of uncertainty. So we'll have to address this as well altogether if we want to be successful in this journey. And we try to provide a few answers about the timeline and the process in these two ACRP research reports that I was mentioning earlier.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's there's a lot of educated guessing. Really, that's really the best that we can, kind of do at this point, and kind of look what other new. I like to look back at natural gas and how it came to be. There was a time where people thought that would be impossible, and we were able to move that around the world. So
thank you for this analogy. It's very relevant, actually. And I think I shared with you this story, Danielle, the first time we talked to each other. But something that kind of saddened me, actually, is that even within the aviation community, you have a lot of people, including influencing people and high profiles, that have a hard time to keep things at the, how can I say that, the objective level when it comes to hydrogen. There is always that passion around hydrogen on the two extremities of the spectrum. You have people saying that hydrogen is a miracle, a chemical compound that is going to save aviation in the world tomorrow. And on the other edge of that spectrum, you have people saying it's a scam. But when you ask for the rationales behind, there is nothing but emotion. And I think it's very important that we keep our hat of engineers, strongly attached on our heads, and that we explore all of these issues and options, with an objective vision, and that we just do our due diligence and all that groundwork in order to identify the use cases, and all the market segments and time periods where hydrogen can be relevant, versus screaming Hindenburg every time you hear about hydrogen. That is completely irrelevant, and it's not very helpful, actually.
Yeah, you're totally inside my brain right now. I was having an email debate with somebody over the weekend, and I said almost verbatim what you just said. But the minute we sort of get into this polarized view of something, we're no longer scientists. We're being an emotional, irrational human. And even if hydrogen can do all of the things that we say it can do, which I believe that it can, there are still challenges. And just to say that it's, perfect and going to save the world, that's not enough to convince somebody that's not a believer. And I mean, that goes with anything, but I'm a strong believer, and the truth is always in the math, and the science always leads us to the answer. But also there are economics that we have to understand. Yes. And, we have to look at all of those as a whole. And that's something, I try to do is, as soon as, somebody asked me one time, what will High Sky do if something better than hydrogen comes out? I said, well, I guess we would change our mission, but if somebody, commercializes nuclear fission, I'm definitely going to be getting on that bandwagon. But it's just, I never want to say that I know what the answer is, because the minute I'm certain that I know what the path is, I become closed-minded to, other paths that might be better. So it's important to, like you said, keep our engineer hats on and remain neutral and look at the numbers and look at the data.
Exactly. And if anyone says, I have the answer, I know the future, well, I'm sorry, but that person might be missing the bigger picture, because no one can predict the future right now when it comes to all of these questions. Again, it's a lot of work that we need to do all together.
Yep. And a perfect example of that was Elon Musk. It was, I think, 20 15 or 16, I talked about this. I do this in the hydrogen aviation course that I teach. I showed a video of him saying how stupid hydrogen was, how inefficient, but he's not taking into account where the lithium and cobalt is sourced, and the humanitarian crisis that is happening with that technology, and the efficiency from, sourcing the raw materials to it actually going on the vehicle. So if you look at hydrogen compared to batteries from that lens, then you can see that hydrogen comes out on top. And then, he did this for years. And then last year, or I think maybe even this year, he announced, they're building a hydrogen fuel cell powered car, and now he's a believer in hydrogen. Maybe it was a PR move because of all the things coming out about the Congo. I don't know, but again, it's just a perfect example of,
I
not.
was going to say, in this era of craziness on social media platforms and so on, I think we need to be extra careful to not fall for the big statements of false prophets who actually have vested commercial interest in specific technical solutions.
Yep.
Again, we're engineers, we're scientists. Let's do our job. Period.
Yep.
and let's propose a science-based strategies in order to build the world of tomorrow. That's
Yep.
it.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Okay, next,
Yes.
Mike Kramer, would you like to unmute and talk? You always have insightful things to say. I'd love to hear from you. Also good to see you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hey, yeah, and thanks, Danielle. I missed the beginning. Was actually on the phone with an airport, so we'll just leave it at that. So question I've got, and the slide you have up is the one I'm looking at, and also just for perspective, we're looking at mainline size aircraft, 737, 757 aircraft. I'd love to get your thoughts on making the hydrogen on the airport versus bringing it in. The quantities we need, just in roundabout terms, a small hub is about 25 million kilograms a year, a small hub. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, is it a pipe with gas? Is it a organic carrier, or is it an electric wire when you're talking about large quantity?
That's a very good question. And here you introduce the temporality aspect of the problem. Because if we talk about early adopters, small volumes at small airports, it's of course not the same answer than what about in 50 years, if there is a hydrogen economy and big supply chains able to carry huge volumes to users, aviation and non-aviation that are nearby and so on. I don't have any easy, final, or ultimate answer to that specific question. And again, the same way, we don't see the same kind of supply chains from an airport to another of the same size, the same type of traffic. I don't think that we'll see a one-fit-all approach to hydrogen at airports, either for early adopters or long-term established demand. You look at two small hub airports, for instance, today, you might see one that is supplied with jet fuel directly from a big national pipeline, and then you will see another one where you have convoys of fuel trucks coming every day in order to bring that jet fuel to the aviation fuel farm. So same way with hydrogen, I think that we'll see different supply chains and approaches depending on the local demand and also the broader local context, but I think that hydrogen carriers are bringing another dimension into that problem, because the same way we might see different type of supply chains for hydrogen per se, what is the case for ammonia or liquid oxygen, liquid organic hydrogen carriers at specific airports? That's what we are researching right now, and I don't necessarily have an answer as of today. But again, a complex question with a lot of great engineering and planning questions to be answered. And sorry, per your first question, yes, if we're talking about a full transition of the commercial fleet, 737s and other from sustainable aviation fuel, for instance, at the 2050 horizon towards something that will be a new kind of hydrogen jet-powered aircraft, we're talking about huge volumes of hydrogen and nothing comparable to what we might do initially for instance, regional aviation mobility with fairly small hydrogen electric aircraft, for instance. The equation is completely different.
Yeah, ATR is about roundabout terms about 1,000 kilograms. A A321 is about 10,000 kilograms. Just to put it in perspective.
The next order of magnitude.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kramer. Okay, Arnie is here. So he would like to respond. So Arnie, you're up.
Hi, thanks, Danielle.
There you are.
Gail, thank you for the presentation. My internet is unstable, so we'll see how long this works. So we're working with a couple of small airports just to provide ground power, which I believe that will be, as far as electrified airports, that'll be the initial use of hydrogen. Because you have folks like Alice and all of the eVTOLs, AAMs, they're all going to be all electric, and they need to be charged. I like 40% of that Tesla is running on coal. It's kind of odd that you have an electric aircraft or an electric car that's running on coal. I believe, and so I'm part of the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub, and we're all about production. We have to get the flow of hydrogen, because otherwise these early adopters don't have any place to get it from, as Danielle gave that example with Plug. So I believe our best effort in the near term, while we're waiting for hydrogen-powered aircraft, which could be in a certification cycle, could be 10 years. You just never know. So in the meantime, getting the supply chain up and going, and for smaller things, like a small airport, is the best use of our time at this point. It is, you can provide power to a 737 through an inverter at 83 kilowatts is what's required. So from a hydrogen generation system, either fuel cell or internal combustion. And there's two big players in internal combustion hydrogen, which is Cummins and Toyota. And they're betting big, and them and BMW are betting big on having internal combustion engines run on hydrogen. So you can't count out internal. There is some nitrogen that gets produced there, but it's pretty minimal. So I guess I'm just trying to make the point that we need to get some wins here. It might be a single or a double, but we're probably not going to hit the home run for.
I think you're having some connection issues, Arnie, but two thoughts that I have when I hear what you said, and completely agree with you, and thank you for bringing that bigger picture on these issues. Number one, when we talk about having aviation transitioning toward greener energy sources, of course, we need to look at the bigger picture. And of course, like for cars, for instance, if we talk about electric aircraft, we need to ask the question, where is the electricity or the hydrogen coming from, and what is the environmental and climate footprints of that sourcing that we're selecting. because otherwise, as you say, an electric aircraft that is with batteries recharged with electricity coming from a coal plant, well, it's an aircraft running on coal, right? Same thing for electric trains. Okay, so completely agree with you here, and I think that the local production of electricity at airport through renewable solutions can bring an answer, at least part of the answer, especially at smaller airports. And then the second item, if you want, is that you're talking about hydrogen, you're talking about battery electric aircraft. Sometimes I hear kind of mental shortcuts, if you want, that I find concerning, you know, from some OEMs or consultants saying that basically, oh, don't worry about all these new technologies. We'll find a way to bring these megawatt or produce that hydrogen through electrolysis at the airport. We need to look at the figures here, and we need to be mindful when we, in terms of expectations that we are creating regarding airports and what we can do at airports, especially with small airports, but not only. You bring electric chargers for aircraft, or you want to build a unit, an electrolysis unit for producing hydrogen. It's a lot in terms of peak load demand versus the pre-existing demand, if you want, for that specific airport. It's not that straightforward to bring all these megawatts, okay, on the ramp or to that whatever hydrogen production plant. You know, maybe the utility provider can do that easily, but then after, how do you bring that to the final aviation user? You might need to build new substations, for instance. That's big money, and that requires a bit of planning and design efforts, right? So again, there is a full ecosystem to develop. It will take a lot of time and energy in order to address all of these questions. And just to give you an order of magnitude here, recently I was attending a conference. I think it was Houston Airport Systems. They were talking about one of their passenger terminals. The existing peak load is around 35 megawatt. If they take into consideration all the new electrical applications, including electric aircraft that they see emerging, at the long-term horizon, which is plus 20 years for airports, we're talking about an additional 40 megawatts. Okay, it's more than doubling the electric demand, and when you need to supply to the airport. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Okay, it's not straightforward, and again, it requires a lot of efforts in terms of planning, funding, and so on, with the different stakeholders.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Vadim's got his hand raised. Good to see you, Vadim. And then I think we have one more question after Vadim. If hopefully we'll have time to get to it. We've got 10 more minutes.
Likewise, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
I missed the very beginning of your presentation. I thought it was very good, thought-provoking presentation overall. But I wanted actually to catch up on something which you noticed which you discussed in the end to some extent. Of course, the presentation is about essentially reconfiguring airports and to making, let's say, hydrogen in that case, let's say hydrogen available at the airport. However, also what has been noticed that that aviation, which is a primary user of that airport, that hydrogen aviation is about 30 years away. So my question would be, in that case, if we make, let's say, if we develop hydrogen infrastructure, we'll make hydrogen available at the airport. What makes airport so attractive for those other, let's say, smaller scale, not aircraft related applications, which will actually enable airport as a hydrogen user in a relatively near future, not 30 years from now, but in relatively near future. So because again, like airport is essentially airport is for transportation, it's for aviation. If there is no hydrogen aviation immediately, which can take immediate advantage of provided hydrogen facilities, what are other applications which airport can foster in order to essentially get through that time lag or gap, which will
Yep.
whatever several couple of decades before hydrogen aviation arrives.
No, thank you, Vadim. This is a good question. And I did talk a bit about that at the beginning of the presentation, but we can discuss more. And your question is completely valid and legit because, again, we were talking about that a couple of questions ago. If we want hydrogen to be successful, or if we identify use cases in aviation where we really want to transition toward hydrogen, well, we need to create a supply chain, and that supply chain to emerge, well, it needs to be commercially viable or commercially interesting for all the different stakeholders playing around hydrogen, especially hydrogen producers, suppliers, and so on. So when we think about, as you said, the early adopters of hydrogen, small volumes, not every airport, specific flight operators at an individual airport, how can we make that interesting, commercially speaking? And you're right, there might be other applications for hydrogen at airports. It's what I was mentioning earlier during the presentation, and I don't think we'll see the same necessarily use cases implemented at all airports. One of them, for instance, I mentioned fuel cell electric vehicles in mass transit. You might have seen that in Western Europe, they have been trialing, and I think there are a few lines actually that now are operational of regional rail services operated with fuel cell electric train sets. Okay, that's not necessarily the way of the future everywhere around the world or everywhere across a railway system within a specific country. We're talking about specific lines that today are not electrified. Maybe there is not a good business case for electrifying them, but we can replace diesel train sets that emits a lot in terms of pollution and greenhouse gases by this kind of trains. Well, guess what? If that train serves an airport, well, you need to bring hydrogen there, maybe, because that can be one use case. And I was mentioning other use cases around fuel cell electric vehicles, individual cars or buses or trucks. We were talking about GSE. Today, the bulk of ground support equipment are transitioning toward battery electric systems. So I don't know how big is fuel cell electric market for that specific application, but again, you have a myriad of individual use cases on the horizon, and we need to develop a good story, bringing together the relevant use cases where hydrogen makes sense in order to build an implementation timeline that makes sense, including on the commercial side, of course, if we want that hydrogen journey to be successful indeed.
And if I could just add to that, another reason why I was so bummed to see what was happening to Plug Power lately is something that Plug Power has done really well is commercialize fuel cell forklifts. And there are tens of thousands of them being used in factories, and many of them at airports. A lot of us don't realize that airports, many are using hydrogen in their operations. They're just kind of siloed and don't really know. So that was something I really admired about Plug Power, was their kind of vision of seeing how they could take forklifts to maybe the hydrogen from forklifts to maybe tugs and little buses and trucks. And then I think what Arnie was saying, and it was kind of chopping out, so if I misspeak, please correct me. But you could also take like your Tesla recharging stations and have that power come from the hydrogen, instead of saying, hey, all Tesla drivers, you should now get a hydrogen fuel cell powered car. Well, you could just make sure that energy going into the charger is coming from hydrogen instead of from coal. I think that was his point he was making. So there's a lot of opportunities. We have 3 minutes. Matt Williams, you're up. You got the last 3 minutes.
Sure, I'll try to keep it as quick as possible. Just really quickly, the state of California has long been a leader in investing in the development of advanced technologies. We've invested billions of dollars over the last several years alone in driving the transformation of the on and off-road spaces to zero emission. And we're now starting to turn our eyes upwards to aviation. I lead the development of our long-term heavy-duty investment strategy, and this is the document that we use ongoing to communicate where we want to invest and actually lay out the policies for how we intend to invest the billions of dollars that we receive from the state legislature. Our projects rely on having really effective partners, and while we have long-standing relationship with the industries that we've historically regulated, we've never regulated aviation for federal reasons, and so we don't really have those partnerships now, and we're looking for the entities that we can partner with, the ones with the resources, know-how, and interest in investing, you know, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars a year into really accelerating the development of these zero emission options. So looking for information on where we can go and who we can talk to get more information, start building those partnerships to make investment and change now.
I just want to selfishly say sorry, Gail. But I'm excited to see CARB here. Matt, thanks for coming. We had somebody from CARB present like 2 years ago. I would love to invite you to present in 2024 to our group. You don't need to be an expert on aviation, but this is exactly what this forum is for. So we can kind of learn from each other. And as you know, we're sort of a technical community, but kind of shifting, at least for me, especially as the CEO at High Sky, shifting my thinking from, okay, yes, hydrogen can do all these amazing things, but what are the economics and what does that look like? So I would love to follow up and chat with you about that. Gail, I'll give you a chance to reply.
Daniel, I will be very interested in watching this presentation actually.
So yeah, please shoot me an email, Matt, d@highsky.net. I will stick it in the chat. And would love to get you on in 2024.
And, Gail, Danielle, thoughts on like some of the players, especially legacy ones, again, those with the millions of dollars to invest now, who would be good first starts, first conversations, help guide our strategy?
First people that come to mind are, and we're at the top of the hour. We may need to talk offline. I don't want to keep everybody's time, but why don't we hop on a call later this week? Does that sound good?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, awesome. Thanks everybody. Thank you so much to Gaël Le Bris. Fantastic conversation. Thanks everybody for attending. Don't forget to register for next month. Like I said, we're doing a $3,000 giveaway that you're not going to want to miss. And we've got some really exciting announcements. So everybody have a wonderful week and a wonderful holiday if you're celebrating this Thursday. And I'll see you in a month. Thanks again.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks. Take care.